The night sky above the colony was always strange. 2 moons hung low, casting silver light across the endless desert. Wind carried the sound of metal towers creaking, the old machines of the human settlement. Most people hated going outside the walls after dark. But one man always walked alone, Elias, the mechanic everyone called the Fool. Elias was different. He fixed broken machines no one cared about, repaired pipes that others said should be left to rust, and often worked in silence at the edge of the colony. People whispered about him in the markets. "Why waste your time?" they said. "Elias will never change anything. He is a dreamer, not a worker." Another laughed, but Elias did not care. He preferred the quiet desert, far from the noise of mocking voices. That night, as he walked along the broken dunes, something caught his eye. A streak of light tore across the sky, bright as fire. It fell fast, leaving a trail of smoke, and then crashed in the distance with a heavy echo. The ground trembled beneath his feet. Most would have turned away, afraid of raiders or strange creatures. But Elias felt a pull, a strange curiosity. Without hesitation, he picked up his toolkit, adjusted the dim lantern strapped to his chest, and began walking toward the crash. The journey took him across sharp rocks and sinking sand. The wind howled like a warning, but still he pressed forward. Finally he found it, a small pod half buried in the desert floor. Steam rose from its sides and faint lights flickered inside. The metal was not human-made. Its surface glowed with strange lines, alive like veins. Elias froze. His heart pounded. Every story he had heard about alien raiders, about deadly creatures, rushed to his mind. But then he heard it, a weak sound, almost like a cry. He leaned closer. The pod door was cracked, barely open. With careful hands, he pulled at the edge, and the door shifted, releasing a hiss of cold air. Inside, he saw movement. Small figures huddled together, their glowing eyes wide with fear. Children. Alien children. Their skin shimmered faintly under the moonlight, colors shifting like liquid silver. They were thin, trembling, their faces marked with scratches. Elias's breath caught in his throat. These were no monsters, no raiders. They were lost, scared, and young. One child reached a tiny hand toward him, making a soft sound like a plea. Elias hesitated. Helping aliens was dangerous. The colony hated outsiders. If anyone found out, they would call him traitor. Already they mocked him as the Fool. If he brought alien children into his life, the word fool would become his only name. But as he looked into those frightened eyes, something inside him shifted. He saw innocence, the same fear human children would feel if stranded far from home. He could not walk away. Carefully, Elias climbed into the pod. The children shrank back at first, but he spoke softly. "It's all right. I won't hurt you." Of course, they could not understand his words. Still, his calm voice seemed to ease them. Slowly, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small water flask. He took a sip himself, then offered it. One child leaned forward, sniffed, then drank greedily. The others followed, passing the flask with trembling hands. Elias smiled faintly. "So, you're just kids." The pod's systems flickered weakly. Strange symbols glowed across a broken panel. Elias examined it with his mechanic's eye. The machine was failing fast. Air filters dying, heat regulators broken. If he left them, they would not survive the night. He sighed. "Well, they already call me a fool." Gathering his courage, Elias lifted the smallest child into his arms. The child was light, fragile, barely able to cling to his shoulder. The others followed, stumbling as they left the ruined pod. Together they walked back toward the colony, shadows stretching long in the moonlight. The journey was heavy. Every step Elias felt the weight of his choice. If guards saw him, he would be punished. If neighbors discovered his secret, they would turn against him. But every time he thought of leaving them behind, he remembered their trembling hands, their wide glowing eyes. He could not abandon them. As he reached the colony walls, he moved quietly, avoiding watchtowers. He knew hidden paths from years of wandering. Finally, he slipped into the old maintenance tunnels where no one ever went. The children followed close, silent and watchful. In the darkness, one child touched his arm and pointed upward, making strange sounds. Elias frowned, confused. The child then traced lines in the dust on the tunnel floor, shapes, stars, and what looked like ships. Elias stared, trying to understand. Were they trying to tell him something? Was someone searching for them, or was something far worse coming? Before he could ask or even pretend to understand, a loud clang echoed through the tunnels. Boots, voices. Colony guards were nearby. Elias's heart raced. If they caught him here with alien children hiding behind him, everything would be over. He whispered quickly, "Quiet, stay behind me." The children obeyed, their glowing eyes wide with fear once again. The footsteps grew louder, shadows moving across the tunnel walls, and then the guard's lantern light appeared, shining directly on Elias. "Who goes there?" a rough voice demanded. Elias froze. Behind him, the children huddled in the dark. The fool had been discovered. The guard's lantern burned bright in the tunnel. Elias squinted, raising a hand to shield his eyes. His heart raced, but he stood still, blocking the children behind him. "It's just me," Elias said quickly. "Elias, the mechanic," the guard grunted. "You again?" "Wandering the tunnels like a rat." "Don't you ever sleep?" The man stepped closer, eyeing him with suspicion. Elias forced a weak smile. "Machines don't fix themselves," the guard laughed, shaking his head. "You're a fool, Elias. Everyone knows it." He spat to the side, then turned away. "Stay out of trouble." When the guard's steps faded, Elias finally allowed himself to breathe. Behind him, the alien children clung to each other, wide-eyed and silent. He crouched low, meeting their gaze. "We're safe. For now." They could not understand his words, but his tone soothed them. Slowly, one child reached out and touched his hand. Their skin was cool, smooth like polished stone. Elias felt something stir inside him, a bond forming, fragile but real. The next morning, the colony buzzed with gossip. People had seen Elias wandering late at night, carrying strange shadows in the dark. At the markets, laughter followed him. "There goes the fool again. Maybe he's talking to ghosts now, or fixing sandworms." Elias kept his head low. He was used to the mockery. But this time it cut deeper because every joke, every laugh threatened the secret he now carried. If they ever learned about the children, the colony would not laugh. They would hunt. At night, Elias returned to the tunnels. The children waited for him, hungry and shivering. He brought food stolen from his small supply: bread, dried meat, and water. At first they sniffed the food cautiously, unsure. But hunger overcame fear, and soon they ate with grateful eyes. Elias sat back, watching them. He wondered what worlds they came from, what voices their parents might be crying out with across the stars. The thought made his chest heavy. He tried to speak to them, pointing at himself. "Elias," then at the nearest child. The boy tilted his head, glowing eyes blinking. Finally, he placed a hand on his chest and made a soft sound. "Liren." Elias smiled. "Liren." He repeated the name slowly, carefully. The boy's lips curved in something like a smile. One by one, the others followed. Strange names, strange sounds. But now they were no longer nameless strangers. They were Liren, Asha, Tay, and two smaller ones whose names Elias struggled to pronounce. He laughed softly at his clumsy attempts, and the children giggled, their voices light and musical. For the first time in years, Elias felt warmth in his lonely heart. Days passed. By day, Elias worked at the colony, repairing broken pipes and ignored engines. By night, he returned to the tunnels, carrying food, blankets, and small tools for the alien children. Slowly, trust grew. The children stopped flinching when he entered. They began showing him things, curious trinkets salvaged from their pod, glowing stones, strange devices that hummed when touched. One evening, Liren pulled Elias toward the dusty floor and began to draw. Using a piece of charcoal, he sketched symbols, lines and circles, stars and ships. Elias frowned, trying to understand. The boy pointed at the sky, then at the drawing. His glowing eyes were serious. Elias leaned closer, heart pounding. "Was this a map?" The children gathered around, nodding, pointing at the symbols. One of them mimed something falling, then crashing. Elias understood. They were telling the story of how their pod had fallen. But then Asha added more marks, sharp shapes surrounding the stars like claws reaching. She pointed at the colony walls, then shook her head violently, fear flashing across her face. Elias's chest tightened. These children weren't just lost. They were running from something dangerous. The colony, meanwhile, grew restless. Strange signals appeared on scanners, unexplained energy spikes, distant movements in space. Leaders dismissed them as pirates passing by or sensor errors, but whispers spread. People grew nervous. Elias listened quietly, saying nothing. He thought of the children's drawings, the fear in their eyes. He knew better, still the mocking never stopped. At the workshop, fellow mechanics sneered. Elias, still chasing shadows? Why don't you fix your own life instead of junk machines? You'll die a fool. He smiled weakly, never answering. For if he spoke, the truth might slip from his lips. But each insult only made his resolve harder. The children needed him. No one else would help. And maybe, just maybe, he was not the fool they thought. That night, as Elias sat in the tunnel with the children, Tay crawled toward him carrying a broken device. It looked like a piece of crystal glowing faintly. The boy pressed buttons, frowned, then handed it to Elias. Elias turned it over in his hands. The device vibrated weakly, lights flashing. He tapped the casing, adjusted a broken wire, and suddenly, the glow grew brighter. The children gasped, their eyes wide with hope. Asha pointed at the crystal, then at the stars in the drawing. Her voice rose urgent. Elias realized the truth. This device was important. Maybe it was a beacon, a way to call for help. But as he held it, the light suddenly died, leaving only darkness. The children sagged, shoulders heavy with despair. Elias clenched his jaw. "Don't worry," he whispered. "I'll fix it." The children looked at him, not understanding the words, but trusting the promise in his voice. And yet deep inside, Elias knew. Repairing this strange device would not be simple. It would require power, tools, and secrecy, all while the colony's suspicions grew, and the sky above held dangers no one was willing to face. The next day, a new rumor swept through the colony. Strange explosions on the far perimeter. Some said pirates, others said storms. But Elias knew the truth was closer, and far more terrifying. That evening, when he returned to the tunnels, the children were waiting with new drawings. This time the symbols showed ships, many ships, approaching fast. Elias stared at the pictures, his blood running cold. The children weren't only lost. They were being hunted. The desert wind carried silence across the colony walls, but it was not the peaceful kind. It was the silence before a storm. Rumors spread like fire. People whispered in the markets about strange signals on the scanners. Hunters swore they saw shadows moving across the night sky. Old traders claimed they heard engines in the distance, too heavy for storms, too sharp for human craft. Still, the leaders laughed. Just pirates passing by, they said. Nothing to fear. But Elias knew better. The alien children had warned him. Their drawings showed ships, claws, fire, and every night since their glowing eyes grew more restless, their small hands pointing at the stars as if counting down the days. Elias tried to live quietly. By day he worked in the repair yard, tightening bolts and welding broken machines. By night he returned to the tunnels where the children waited for him with hopeful eyes. He brought food, water, and scraps of metal to keep them busy. Liren, the eldest, surprised him most. The boy studied every tool Elias carried, mimicking his work. Once, when Elias struggled with a rusted pipe, Liren tapped the joint in a certain way and the metal shifted easily. Elias laughed. "You're better than me already." The boy did not understand the words, but his small smile told Elias he understood the meaning. Despite the bond growing between them, shadows pressed closer each day. Elias noticed it first in the markets. People no longer mocked him with laughter. They stared instead. Long, quiet stares as if waiting for him to slip. As if they sensed his secret. One evening, as Elias carried his bag of tools through a side alley, two men blocked his way. "You've been sneaking out at night," one said. "We've seen you heading to the tunnels." "What are you hiding, fool?" Elias forced a smile. "Broken pipes. Someone has to fix them." The men laughed, but their eyes were cold. "Pipes don't eat food, Elias. Be careful. Some people might think you're helping outsiders." The words cut deep. He tightened his grip on the bag. If they discovered the children, it would not be mockery anymore. It would be punishment. That night in the tunnels, Elias's fear showed on his face. The children noticed. Asha reached out, tugging at his sleeve. She drew in the dust again, stars, ships, and fire. Then she pointed at him, her voice soft but urgent. Elias shook his head. "I don't understand." Frustrated, the children gathered, speaking quickly in their strange language. Then Liren picked up the broken crystal device. He pressed it into Elias's hands, eyes pleading. Elias studied the device again. It was beyond him, too alien, too complex. But he could feel its purpose. It wanted to connect, to call. If he could repair it, maybe help would come. But if the wrong people discovered it, the colony might turn on him before any help arrived. Still, Elias whispered to himself, "I'll try." The children smiled faintly, though fear still lingered in their glowing eyes. 2 nights later, the colony shook. A distant boom rolled across the desert, rattling windows. Alarms wailed for the first time in years. People rushed to the walls, pointing at the horizon. Lights, flashes, explosions. Something was happening out there. Elias pushed through the crowd, heart pounding. Through the dust, he saw faint shapes. Ships cutting through the sky, their engines leaving trails of fire. Too many to count. "Pirates!" someone screamed. "Raiders!" shouted another. Panic spread fast. Leaders barked orders. Guards rushed to man the defenses, but the air carried a weight Elias could not ignore. This was no ordinary raid. As the colony scrambled, Elias slipped away. He had only one thought: the children. In the tunnels, they were already awake, huddled together. Their eyes glowed brighter, filled with terror. Liran ran to Elias and pointed toward the surface, shouting in his strange tongue. Elias understood without translation. "They're here, aren't they?" he whispered. The children nodded, trembling. Asha stepped forward, drawing again in the dust. This time the shapes were clearer, large ships surrounding smaller ones. The smaller ones looked like the pod they had fallen in. Elias's stomach twisted. The children had not just crashed by accident. They had been hunted, and now their hunters had found the colony. Above, the alarms grew louder. Distant blasts shook the tunnels, dust falling from the ceiling. The children clung to Elias, their small hands gripping his sleeves. He looked at them, then at the broken crystal device in his pocket. If he could fix it, maybe their people would come. Maybe they would have a chance. But the colony was blind, still laughing at danger, still calling him fool. They would not listen until it was too late. Elias knelt before the children, his voice steady. "I'll protect you, no matter what they say, no matter what happens. I promise." The children could not understand his words, but they understood his eyes, his tone, his courage. Liran placed his small hand on Elias's chest as if to say, "We trust you." Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the tunnels. The sound of boots. Torches flickered in the darkness. Voices followed. "Search this way." "The fool has been hiding something." Elias froze. His promise had already been tested. He looked at the children, then at the approaching lights. His mind raced. If they found the children now, all hope would die. And so Elias did the only thing his heart told him to do. He stood, ready to face the colony's wrath, ready to shield the alien children with his own life. The shadows were no longer just in the sky. They were in the tunnels. They were here. The colony woke to fire. Sirens screamed across the night, their shrill wails echoing from tower to tower. Searchlights cut through smoke rising from the outer walls. The ground shook as explosions thundered in the distance. Raiders had come. Their ships descended like black hawks, engines roaring, dust storms swirling around them. Sharp claw-shaped hulls blotted out the stars, and from their bellies poured smaller craft, metal beasts filled with soldiers. Elias ran through the tunnels, heart hammering. Behind him, the alien children clung close, their glowing eyes wide with terror. Dust rained from the ceiling as another blast shook the colony above. He whispered over his shoulder, "Stay close. Don't let go." The tunnels twisted, each corner darker than the last. Shouts echoed from every direction. Guards searching, colonists fleeing, enemies advancing. Elias knew the children could not remain hidden here much longer. The raiders were too many. The colony was breaking. Above ground, chaos reigned. Colonists screamed as buildings crumbled under laser fire. Guards scrambled to defend the gates, their rifles sparking weakly against the raiders' shields. The colony's defense cannons, old and rusty, fired wildly, some jamming after only a few shots. The leaders, so quick to dismiss the warnings, now shouted useless orders from behind walls. The people scattered, panic in their eyes. And in the shadows, Elias saw the truth. The raiders were not here for trade, not here for loot. They moved with purpose, searching, hunting. The alien children were their prey. He ducked into a ruined storage room, motioning for the children to crouch low. Their small bodies trembled. One of the youngest began to cry, the sound soft but piercing. Elias knelt quickly, pressing a finger to his lips. "Shh, quiet now. They'll hear." Liren, the eldest, pulled the smaller one close, whispering in their strange tongue until the sobs faded. Ilias's chest tightened at the sight. These weren't soldiers. They weren't threats. They were only children trying to survive. He wanted to run with them, take them far into the desert away from this war. But he knew the raiders would not stop. Not until they had the children. And so, he had to protect them here. The air shook as another explosion tore through the colony wall. Raiders stormed inside, their dark armor glinting under firelight. They moved like predators, scanning every face, every shadow. One shouted in a guttural language Elias did not know, but the meaning was clear. Search everywhere. Elias's mind raced. He reached into his bag and pulled out the broken crystal device. Its faint glow flickered weakly. If he could repair it, maybe the children's people would come. But time was running out. Suddenly the door of the storage room creaked. Elias froze. Heavy boots thudded outside. The children's glowing eyes locked onto him, wide with fear. Elias clenched his fists, whispering, "Stay behind me!" The door burst open. A raider stepped inside, his armor black as night, weapon glowing in his hand. His gaze fell on Elias immediately. The mechanic stood tall, his heart pounding but his voice steady. "Just me," he said. "No one else here." The raider tilted his head, scanning the room. His weapon hummed as he stepped closer. Behind Elias, the children held their breath, their small forms hidden in shadow. Elias reached slowly into his bag, pretending to search for tools. The raider raised his weapon higher, and then Elias struck. He hurled a wrench with all his strength, the metal clanging against the raider's helmet. The soldier staggered back with a roar. Elias seized the moment, slamming into him with desperate force. The weapon clattered across the floor. "Run!" Elias shouted. The children darted past, slipping through a side passage. The raider snarled, swinging an armored fist. It crashed into Elias's chest, knocking the air from his lungs. Pain burned through him. But he grabbed the weapon from the ground, firing blindly. A bolt of light struck the raider's shoulder, sending sparks flying. The enemy fell, writhing. Elias didn't wait to see if he would rise. He staggered after the children, clutching the strange weapon tightly. The colony was a battlefield. Flames licked the walls, smoke clouded the air, and screams echoed everywhere. Raiders dragged colonists into the streets, demanding answers in their harsh tongue. One man cried, "We don't know what you want!" Before being struck down, Elias pulled the children into the shadows of a broken alley. His chest burned from the fight, but he forced his voice steady. "We need to move now." Asha pointed toward the center of the colony, the reactor tower. Its glowing lights pulsed through the smoke. The children spoke quickly, urgent, pointing at the broken crystal. Elias understood, the reactor. That was the power they needed. If he could bring the device there, maybe, just maybe, it would work. But raiders already circled the tower, guarding it like wolves. Elias clenched his jaw. "Of course," he muttered. "Nothing's ever easy." As they prepared to move, a deafening roar shook the air. From above, a massive ship descended, its shadow swallowing the colony square. Its metal frame gleamed like a predator's tooth. The children cried out, their voices filled with terror. Liren pointed at the ship, his face pale. Elias didn't need translation, this was the one. The hunters had arrived. The ground shook as the ship opened, releasing waves of raiders into the colony. Their leader stepped forward, tall and armored, eyes burning like coals. His voice boomed across the streets, "Bring me the children!" Elias's heart turned cold. They were no longer searching blindly. They knew, and the hunt had truly begun. Smoke curled into the night sky as the raider leader's voice echoed through the colony. "Bring me the children." The words, though alien, carried a weight everyone understood. The colony fell into silence, fear freezing the people in place. Mothers clutched their children, guards lowered their weapons, and whispers spread like fire. "Children? Whose children?" Elias's stomach knotted. They weren't searching blindly anymore. Somehow they knew. He pulled Liren and the others deeper into the alley, heart pounding. "We have to move now." The children obeyed, but their glowing eyes darted in every direction, fear pressing against their small frames. Every shadow held danger, every sound a threat. They ran through ruined streets. Fires burned in the distance, casting wild light on crumbling walls. Raiders patrolled in groups, dragging colonists aside, demanding answers. Elias kept to the shadows, moving from corner to corner, his lungs burning with each step. Twice they were nearly caught. Once, a raider's searchlight swept across the street just as Elias pushed the children into a collapsed doorway. Another time, a patrol passed so close he could hear their armored breathing. The children held their breath silent as stone until the danger moved on. At last, they ducked into the husk of an old workshop. Dust and broken tools littered the ground. Elias barred the door with a rusted beam, his chest heaving. The children collapsed in exhaustion, their small bodies trembling. Elias crouched, trying to steady his own breath. "Just a little further," he whispered, though he knew they didn't understand. That was when Liran stepped forward. The boy reached into the folds of his clothing and pulled out the strange crystal device. Its faint glow lit the dark workshop. He pressed it into Elias's hands, eyes pleading. Elias frowned. "This again?" The boy nodded fiercely, pointing at the reactor tower visible through a crack in the roof. His glowing eyes burned with urgency. Elias turned the crystal over in his hands. He had seen it before, broken, flickering as if dying. But now, holding it in this moment of desperation, he felt its weight differently. This was no trinket. This was hope. "What are you trying to tell me?" Elias whispered. The children gathered around, speaking quickly in their strange language. Their voices were high, urgent, overlapping. Elias shook his head, frustrated. "I don't understand," and then the crystal pulsed. A shimmer of light spread across its surface. Symbols danced like fireflies, rearranging themselves until they formed shapes Elias recognized. Human letters. Words glowed faintly in the air. Link unstable. Translation initializing. Elias's eyes widened. It translates." The children gasped, watching as the crystal pulsed again. Suddenly, a voice filled the room, not alien, not human, but something in between. Mechanical, broken, but understandable. "Help. Power. Call home." Elias stared. The children looked at him with desperate hope. For the first time, he understood. The crystal was a beacon. If powered, it could call across the stars. It could bring their people here. But powering it meant only one thing. The colony's reactor, and the raiders already controlled it. Elias gritted his teeth. Of course. Nothing easy. He stood, sliding the crystal into his pack. The children watched, waiting for his choice. Finally, he nodded. "We're going to the tower." Asha pointed at the door, shaking her head. She mimed raiders outside, danger everywhere. Elias gave a grim smile. "I know. But if we stay, they'll find you anyway. This is our only chance." The children were silent, then slowly nodded. They trusted him. They slipped back into the burning streets. Elias led them through side alleys, using his memory of the colony's old blueprints. He knew hidden routes others had long forgotten. Still, danger was never far. Raiders stalked the roads, dragging people from their homes. Fires lit the night as explosions shook the walls. At one point, Elias froze as two raiders blocked their path. He held the children back, pressing them against the wall. His hand brushed against the stolen raider weapon he carried. He hesitated. He was no soldier, no killer. But when the raiders stepped closer, their eyes sweeping the alley, Elias raised the weapon with shaking hands. The first shot hissed through the air, striking the nearest raider. Sparks flew as the armor cracked. The second raider roared, raising his gun, but Elias fired again, dropping him with a burst of light. Silence followed, heavy and hot. The children stared at him wide-eyed. Elias lowered the weapon, his hands trembling. He had fought before, fists, wrenches, words, but never like this. "Come on," he whispered. "We don't have time." Finally, the reactor tower rose before them. Its lights glowed through the smoke, humming with power. Raiders patrolled its base, their weapons gleaming. The tower loomed like a fortress guarded by dozens of soldiers. The children crowded around Elias, whispering urgently. He pulled the crystal from his pack. Its faint glow pulsed faster now, as if sensing the reactor's energy. Elias clenched his jaw. He had brought them this far. But storming the reactor? It was madness. He looked at the children, their glowing eyes, their trembling hands, their desperate trust. He thought of all the times people had called him fool. Perhaps they were right. But if being a fool meant saving these children, then so be it, he whispered almost to himself. All right then. One last try. He raised the weapon, eyes locked on the reactor. The children huddled close, clutching one another, and then behind them a shadow moved. The raider leader stepped into the street, his massive frame blocking their escape. His weapon glowed red, eyes burning. Elias froze, heart stopping. The children gasped, shrinking back. The leader's voice rumbled like thunder. "You cannot hide them, fool." The raider leader's shadow stretched long across the burning street. His voice was deep, steady, and cruel. "You cannot hide them, fool." The alien children huddled behind Elias, trembling. Their glowing eyes darted from the towering figure to the ruined streets. Elias's own hands shook, but he lifted the stolen weapon anyway, pointing it at the armored giant. "I don't care who you are," Elias said, his voice raw. "You're not taking them." The raider leader tilted his head, almost amused. His armor hissed as he stepped closer. "They are ours. Give them to me and perhaps I let you live." Elias's breath caught. The words were clear, not because he understood the raider's tongue, but because the translation crystal pulsed in his bag, echoing the meaning into his mind. For the first time, there was no barrier between them. Only truth. He squared his shoulders. "You'll have to kill me first." The leader's eyes burned like coals. Gladly, the fight was brutal. The raider moved with the weight of a predator, each step shaking the ground. Elias fired, bolts of light sparking against the armored chest. The giant hardly flinched. With one sweep of his weapon, he sent Elias crashing against a wall. Pain seared through his ribs. He gasped, struggling to rise. The children cried out, but he waved them back. "Stay hidden." The leader advanced. Elias gritted his teeth and fired again, aiming for joints, for weak spots. One shot grazed the raider's shoulder, sending sparks flying. The giant roared, striking again. Elias rolled aside, barely escaping the glowing blade that split the stone where he had stood. He knew he could not win. Not like this, but winning was not the goal. Surviving long enough, that was enough. Using the chaos, Elias shouted, "Go! Run to the tower." Liren hesitated, eyes wide, but then grabbed the others, pulling them toward the reactor. Their small forms disappeared into the smoke. The leader saw, bellowing with rage. "No!" He raised his weapon, ready to cut them down. Elias threw himself forward, tackling the raider's legs. The two crashed to the ground in a storm of sparks and dust. The weapon clattered away, its red glow fading. The leader snarled, throwing Elias aside like a rag doll. But the delay was enough. The children vanished into the tower's shadows. Elias spat blood, forcing himself to his feet. His body screamed in pain, but his spirit burned hotter. He smiled weakly through broken breath. "Guess I'm not such a fool after all." The raider's eyes narrowed. "You will die screaming." Inside the tower, the children scrambled toward the humming core. The reactor pulsed with raw energy, filling the chamber with blinding light. The crystal device flickered wildly in Liren's hands, eager, alive. Elias stumbled in moments later, clutching his side. "Do it," he gasped. "Use the power." The children pointed at the main console, old human tech patched together over years of decay. Elias staggered forward, pulling tools from his bag. His fingers worked fast, instinct guiding him. He bypassed wires, stripped circuits, and forced a channel from the reactor to the crystal. The device pulsed brighter, symbols swirling like fire. A voice whispered through the air again. "Power sufficient." "Preparing signal." Elias allowed himself a breath of hope. "It's working," but the moment was shattered by a crash. The raider leader stormed inside, armor scorched but unbroken. His burning eyes fell on the children, then on Elias at the console. "No one can save them," he growled. Elias spun, weapon raised, but the raider struck first. The blade seared across the floor, sparks flying. Elias dove, rolling to shield the children. The console cracked under the impact, alarms screaming. The crystal wavered, its glow faltering. "Signal," interrupted. "Power unstable." Elias's heart pounded. He couldn't let it fail now. He turned to the children, shouting, "Hold it steady!" Liren and Asha pressed their small hands against the device, their glowing skin merging with its light. The crystal pulsed stronger, responding to their touch. The leader roared, charging forward. Elias threw himself in the way, weapon blazing. Bolts hammered against the giant's armor, sparks and fire bursting with each hit. The raider staggered but still came on, closer, stronger, unstoppable. Elias's weapon clicked empty. No more shots. He stared at the glowing giant bearing down on him. His breath slowed. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. He thought of the colony, of all the people who had laughed at him. He thought of lonely nights in the desert, fixing machines no one cared about. He thought of the word fool, spoken 1,000 times. And then he thought of the children, their glowing eyes, their small hands clutching his sleeve, their voices whispering in the dark. If this was how he died, then it was worth it. Elias grabbed a live wire from the broken console. Electricity crackled violently. He hurled it at the raider just as the giant swung his blade. The wire struck armor, and the reactor's power surged. Lightning exploded through the room. The raider screamed, his armor sparking, his weapon falling. He staggered back, smoke rising from his body. For the first time, Elias saw fear in those burning eyes, and in that moment, the crystal blazed like a star. Signal sent, allies incoming. The children cried out with joy, their voices echoing. Elias collapsed to his knees, chest heaving, his strength gone. But the fight was not over. The raider leader, scorched and broken, rose once more. His burning eyes locked onto Elias. You will not live to see them arrive. He raised his blade, stepping closer. Elias, weaponless and drained, could only stare up at him and wait for the final strike. The raider leader's shadow loomed over Elias. His glowing blade hummed, ready to strike. Smoke and sparks filled the reactor chamber, the air hot with the burn of energy. Elias lay on the ground, chest heaving, too weak to rise. His body ached, his weapon gone, but his eyes still held fire. Do it, he rasped, if that's what it takes. The children huddled behind him, their small hands gripping the crystal beacon, its light still pulsing like a heart. The signal had been sent, but Elias feared he would not live long enough to see what answered. The raider leader raised his blade high. You die first, he growled, then the children. But before the strike fell, the air changed, a deep rumble echoed across the skies. The walls of the reactor shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The ground trembled under Elias's body. The children gasped, their glowing eyes wide with sudden hope. The crystal blazed brighter, its voice whispering through the chamber. Response received. Arrival imminent. The raider leader froze. His burning eyes narrowed. He turned toward the sky above as if sensing something. No, he hissed. Too soon. Outside, the night split open. From beyond the clouds, massive shapes descended, towering ships, their hulls glowing with silver light. They moved with the grace of predators, faster and larger than anything the colony had ever seen. Their arrival shook the air, a storm of power and sound. The colonists stared in awe. Some fell to their knees, others ran in fear, not knowing whether these new giants came as friends or conquerors. The raiders knew. And their fear was real. They scrambled back to their ships, shouting in panic. The skies filled with fire as silver beams lanced down, tearing through raider craft like paper. The hunters, once predators, now fled like prey. In the reactor chamber, the raider leader roared with rage. No, they are mine! He lunged at Elias, blade crashing down. But Elias rolled aside, every muscle screaming in pain. The weapon struck sparks against the floor. The children cried out. Lyran, shaking but brave, stepped forward, holding the glowing beacon high. The crystal's light flared, forcing the raider back. Elias, seizing the moment, grabbed a length of broken pipe. With all the strength left in his body, he swung. The pipe crashed against the leader's helmet, cracking the metal. The giant staggered, blood seeping through the fracture. The raider roared, stumbling toward the exit. But the silver light outside grew brighter, flooding the chamber. A figure appeared, tall, armored, radiant with the same glow as the children, an alien warrior. The leader froze, staring at the newcomer. His eyes widened in sudden fear. No, not you. The warrior raised a hand and a beam of silver light cut through the air. The raider leader screamed as the energy consumed him, armor shattering, body falling to ash. His blade clattered to the floor, lifeless. The chamber fell silent. Elias collapsed, gasping for breath. The children rushed to him, their small hands gripping his arms, his chest, his face. He smiled faintly, eyes heavy. You're safe now, he whispered. That's all that matters. The alien warrior knelt beside him, their silver armor shining. Their voice was calm, deep, translated by the crystal. You protected them. At great cost, Elias laughed weakly. Everyone called me a fool. The warrior's glowing eyes softened. Then the galaxy needs more fools. Outside, the colony lay in ruins but not destroyed. The alien fleet hovered above, their presence filling the sky. Raiders fled in every direction, broken and beaten. For the first time, the colonists saw the truth. Elias, the man they mocked, the man they called useless, had saved them all. By protecting children they would have abandoned. Crowds gathered as the alien warriors escorted the children out of the reactor tower. They clung to Elias's sides as he stumbled forward, guided by their small hands. Gasps spread through the colonists. They whispered his name no longer with laughter but with awe. That's Elias. He saved them. He saved us all. At the landing site, the children's people emerged from their shining ships. Tall and graceful, their voices carried power and music. They embraced the young ones, relief and joy shining in their glowing eyes. Liren refused to let go of Elias. He tugged the warrior's arm, speaking in his tongue, his voice urgent. The crystal translated, "Protector." "He is our protector." The warrior turned to Elias, bowing slightly. "They name you Protector. That honor cannot be taken away." Elias, exhausted and bleeding, managed a faint smile. "Protector. I'll take that over, fool." The children hugged him tightly, their glowing faces pressed to his chest. For the first time in years, Elias felt he belonged. As the alien fleet prepared to leave, Elias stood at the edge of the colony, watching the silver ships rise into the stars. The children waved from the ramp, their voices calling out, their eyes bright with love and gratitude. "Protector," they cried, the word echoing across the ruined streets. Elias raised a hand in farewell, his heart heavy but proud. He knew they would be safe now, far beyond the reach of raiders. Behind him, the colonists gathered in silence. No one called him fool anymore. They saw him for what he was, a man who stood when all others turned away, a man who risked everything for strangers, a hero. The silver ships vanished into the night sky, leaving the colony in quiet ruins. Elias looked up, his eyes following the stars. For once, the desert did not feel empty. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones no one believes in. And sometimes, the fool saves everyone.